We all know that building muscle is hard, but the truth is that it's not equally hard for everyone. If you're a skinny person who struggles to build muscle despite spending hours and hours and hours in the gym, then this video is for you. Today, we're going to review the main mistakes that are preventing you from building muscle, and we'll also see how to fix them. But first, I want to remind you of something. The muscle is one of the most important organs that exist in your body. Yes, the muscle is an organ, and in fact, increasing your muscle mass to a certain point, that is always a long-term investment. Why? Assuming a lot of the quality and quantity of muscle you have will largely depend on your functional capacity. That is, how much and how you move, and also the functioning of your metabolism. And this is especially true when we reach a certain age. An older person without muscle is more prone to falls, less resistant to illness, and has a higher risk of metabolic problems such as type 2 diabetes or fatty liver. And now, let's look at some of the most common obstacles in gaining muscle mass. The first problem is as follows. Believe me, it's a very common problem. You're not eating enough. And you might say, how? You're not eating enough? Is that the problem for building muscle mass? Well, yes, this is very common. Just as individuals with excess fat tend to think they eat less than they actually do, thin individuals tend to think the opposite, that they eat a lot, when in reality they eat just enough to maintain an energetic balance because, well, naturally the energy expenditure daily total of these people tends to be a high energy expenditure, and it always has been. These are people with high physical activity. Remember, we call this NILT, and they also usually have fidgeting behaviors, which, if you remember, are stereotype movements we usually make when we are sitting, working, or attending a presentation that doesn't interest us too much. And if that wasn't enough, they are usually people who have good regulation of hunger and satiety. And this means that they usually get effectively satiated with less food. So what's the solution? What can I do? Well, first, realize the problem. If you're watching this video, you may relate to this situation. Second, trust a professional to guide you in the amounts, because if it's your case, you probably have to force yourself to eat a little more than what your body is telling you is indicating to you at each meal. Then something that is quite useful is to increase the frequency of your meals. Let me explain. If you want to eat more, you have to do the opposite of intermittent fasting. It's about emptying meals or reducing the frequency, which is what we do when we do intermittent fasting, will make you eat less unconsciously. But doing the opposite, increasing the frequency, will make you eat more. Bodybuilders know this intuitively. They get to have 6 or 7 meals a day and thus manage to get the necessary calories. Bodybuilders need to eat a huge amount of calories. For what purpose? To build muscle. And that's why you'll see very few bodybuilders doing intermittent fasting. That said, let's contextualize things. For the general population, this intake pattern is far from optimal. But if what you want is to generate a caloric surplus, consume more calories than you expend in order to build muscle, then it's a way to achieve it. I'm not saying it's the only way, nor am I saying that you can't be in surplus eating 3 meals a day or even 2 meals a day, but it's more difficult. Fourth point, make a proper selection of foods without including too many ultra-processed foods. Yes, because yes, stuffing yourself with ultra-processed foods can quickly increase your caloric intake and put you in surplus, but is this what we want? Do we want to worsen or improve our health? Basing your diet on ultra-processed foods is indeed one of the fastest ways to gain excess fat, alter your gut microbiota, fall short on micronutrients, and facilitate digestive problems. So try to make a selection of healthy but caloric foods. Which ones? Well, look, nuts, nut butters, avocado, olive oil, canned goods in olive oil, blue fish, or even a slightly fattier cut of meat. Moving on, let's discuss the second problem we're addressing today. Insufficient training volume. What does this mean? Among the training variables, volume is one of the most important, and I often come across people who want to gain muscle mass but train less than 2 hours a week. For whatever reasons, yes, but they train little. Unless you're completely new to this, it's usually insufficient. If you want to gain muscle, a good starting point would be at least 3 to 4 hours a week of focused training. And why do I say that about focused training? Well, look, I tell you this because if out of every hour you spend in the gym, you spend 45 minutes looking at your phone, checking Instagram, or replying to private messages or comments, then your training volume for that day, for that training session, is not 1 hour, but 15 minutes. Therefore, to the gym, or wherever you go to train, because we don't always have to do it in a gym, go train and take it that seriously. If not, you won't improve. If not, you won't gain muscle mass, I assure you. And another problem derived also or similar to this one, which is low intensity. I think it's even more common than the problem of low volume. In terms of training, falling short in intensity is one of the most common mistakes. Nobody likes to suffer, not even me. Increasing the intensity of your workout adds discomfort or suffering to the training. It hurts, itches, burns, it's not comfortable. No, nobody likes it, and you don't have to die in every workout. But if you go home in the same conditions as you entered the gym, then you're not doing things right. No, you're not doing it. Intensity is subjective. For a grandmother, getting up from a chair can be a high-intensity repetition, while for you a squat with 100 kilos can be a low-intensity. So how do we standardize this intensity thing? How to be, or if I am striving at an appropriate intensity, or if I am falling short in intensity? We have two options. We can discuss the percentage of your maximum repetition, if you can see it. What is this? What is the maximum repetition, or RM? Well, it's the maximum weight you can lift in a specific exercise, and with good technique, that is, doing the exercise correctly. If your max repetition for squats is 100 kilos, which is the most you can currently lift, then 70% of your max repetition would be working with 70 kilos. So, try to stay at least there to build muscle at 60-70% of your RM in each exercise. This is one way, but there's also another. There's another way to monitor intensity, which are the reps in reserve or repetitions in reserve. What does this reps in reserve mean? Well, reps in reserve means the repetitions you leave undone. In a certain series, reps in reserve, that is, if you're doing push-ups and you do 10, but you think you could have done 13, then you've stayed at an reps in reserve 3. You've left 3 in the glove compartment. Without doing, always try to stay at an reps in reserve, that is, and approximately 2-4 reps in reserve to know that you are working at an intensity sufficient to give a mechanical stimulus to the muscle and give it a reason to grow. And we're going to move on to the last point we're going to mention today, which is very important. I would say it's one of the most important, and it is, pay attention, greatly reduce carbohydrates. Often the problem with dissemination, and here I also self-criticize, is that we do not make it clear enough what tools are for which people, and of course people get confused. The rise of low-carb diets, which were banned almost decades ago and now seem to be the norm, has had several unwanted side effects. People who were previously carbophobic and strictly avoided carbohydrates are now even more avoidant. Many people also aim to build muscle or enhance athletic performance while minimizing or completely avoiding carbohydrate consumption. Why? Because they've read on a biohacking blog that ketosis is the supreme state of humanity, or because they've seen a beast of 120 kilos who has been training for 106 months and 40 years lift 200 kilos in a squat, or for who knows what reasons. In any case, what I want to tell you today is that carbohydrates that come from healthy food sources are probably the macronutrient, along with protein, that will help you gain muscle the most. And this is because carbohydrates play an essential role in all the following processes, starting with this one. They improve muscle recovery. At the gym, you work for your body, but as soon as you leave the gym, your body works for you, producing the necessary physiological adaptations in your muscle fibers so that the next time you face that physical effort, you can perform it under better conditions is something that happens from the time you finish training until the next training session. That's the magic of adaptation. In this case, an adequate intake of carbohydrates and protein will also help you optimize these repair and maintenance mechanisms. They are performed in the best way they can be performed. But also, carbohydrates will improve your performance during training. Why? because having your glycogen stores full at the start of each session will allow you to perform more repetitions and at a higher intensity than if you train with empty glycogen stores. Yes, this is not as important when the exercise is aerobic and sustained, running, rhyming, skating, fast walking, but you already know that to gain muscle mass, you must work on muscle strength, either with external loads, with elastic bands, or with kettlebells, or with your own body weight. Then carbohydrates are anabolic in themselves. They are intrinsically anabolic as they stimulate cellular signaling cascades that are anabolic, like mTOR, which you have probably heard many times. They also momentarily increase the production of a hormone that is often attacked, which is insulin. Won't they worsen my metabolism by increasing insulin, an anabolic hormone? Won't I have more insulin resistance? Well, not if you train, and not if you maintain an acceptable body fat percentage. Oh, the circumscribed and momentary elevation of insulin is not the problem, it's chronic hyperinsulinemia, which will only be in sedentary subjects, subjects with metabolic problems, subjects with obesity, overweight, subjects who maintain a chronic superhabit all their life. That's when the metabolic problems and insulin resistance will be. All of the above, all of this that I have mentioned, well, it results in a lower risk of injury. Lower risk of injury, as the quality and quantity of muscle will be better if you take enough carbohydrates, and the intertraining recovery capacity will also be increased. But as if that were not enough, they also improve. Your hormonal environment, your hormones, facilitating the production of sexual hormones like testosterone and inhibiting the excess of cortisol, a catabolic hormone that can slow down your recovery. As a general rule, if you want to gain muscle mass, we can say that you should not stay below 2-3 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of weight per day. And we have other obstacles to discuss, such as rest, progressive overload, sleep, and some others, but these are for the next video. So thank you very much for staying until the end. Really a big hug. See you soon and keep empowering.